Hello and welcome. Good evening to everyone. At TCS, we are celebrating 40 years of research and innovation. And as part of the celebration, we bring to you this special webinar on careers and opportunities in computing research. This is in association with ACM India. 9 decades ago, Alan Turing changed the course of humanity for the better with a remarkable invention, the general purpose computer. In the decades since, computer and computing has changed. They've become an inevitable part of our lives. In fact, I'm sure many of you are joining us today through a computer. So how has computing evolved? What role does research play in this evolution? What does it take to conduct world-class research in computing? Does one need a PhD? Are the lines between academia and industry research blurring? These are some of the questions that we'll tackle today with the help of an eminent panel of researchers and scientists. But before that, I'd like to invite Dr. Chitra Babu, professor from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, SSN College of Engineering, and a member of ACM India, to deliver the opening address.
Hi, good evening, good morning to all of you, and welcome again to this third session of quarterly webinar series, jointly organized by ACM India and TCS Research, where you get to interact with some of the most eminent computing leaders, including a Turing Award laureate. I'm Chitra Babu, chair of ACM I6CAC chapter, the Indian counterpart of the Special Interest Group on Computer Science Education, as well as Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at SSN College of Engineering, Chennai. Let me take a couple of minutes now to brief you about ACM India. Simply said, ACM's mission is to promote computing as a science and profession. You can see ACM India at a glance on this slide, but let me give some examples of what being associated with ACM means. You will be part of world's largest computing society. ACM India is spread across the country through its members and chapters. You can access ACM's resources as an individual or as a chapter. Inclusion and equity plays an integral part of our activities, leading to diversity in the representation, whether it is on gender, geography, educational institutions, or career paths. In particular, ACMW India focuses on empowerment and advancement of women in computing. In terms of promoting research, ACM India organizes some of the most respected events for researchers to present and share their contributions. Among the multiple education initiatives of ACM India, summer schools are just around the corner in July. We also work with the whole spectrum of institutions in the education sphere, from policy-making bodies such as AICTE to schools at grassroots level to increase the quality of computing education. When it comes to the many resources for individual professional development, you may have come across the Eminent Speaker Program, ACM India webinars, newly launched mini graphs, and of course the ACM Digital Library, to mention a few. To acknowledge and provide visibility to outstanding contributions from India, we have now instituted reputed awards also in various categories. Hope I have been able to describe what ACM India stands for. I would like to invite you to come, participate, contribute, and advance your career. I'm sure you'll enjoy today's session and find a lot of takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chitra. This is a gentle reminder to our viewers that we'll take audience questions at the end of the panel. So do post your questions in the comments and we'll pick them up at the end of the panel discussion. Now, on to the main event. I have the honor of introducing the esteemed panel to you. We have Professor Jeff Ullman. He is the Stanford Ascherman Professor of Computer Science and also a Turing Awardee. We also have Ranjita Bhagwan. She is Senior Principal Researcher at Microsoft Research India. We have Professor Supratik Chakraborty, Department of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Bombay. And Dr. Swaran Lata, she's a retired scientist and head of the TDIL program at MeitY, Government of India. Today's session is being moderated by our very own Dr. Gautam Shroff. He's a TCS Fellow, Senior Vice President, and Head of TCS Research. Over to you, Gautam.
Thanks, Priyanka, and thanks to all the panelists for agreeing to be here and share your thoughts and experiences. I'm going to start with Ranjita and ask some very basic questions, which I'll ask all the panelists one by one. So, Ranjita, how did you decide to pursue research as a career? That's one. And secondly, if there's some young student wondering whether they should do research, why don't you ask them to ask themselves? And lastly, you do research within an industry lab, so you must have thought at some point in time whether you should be in academia, industry research, or even perhaps another part of the industry or the government. So something about why you choose where you are. That's
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Gautam, for asking me those questions. And firstly, thank you so much for having me on this panel. So about the first question, right? How did I choose research as a career? It was not exactly by accident, but a little bit by accident because, when I was in my undergrad, in the first few years of my undergrad, I was just doing everything, not just academics. I was doing all sorts of other things, sports, cultural activities, etc. So my grades were terrible. But then towards my third year and my final year, I started enjoying computer science and the different kinds of computer science courses that I took. Really enjoyed them. And that's when I realized I like computer science and I enjoy computer science. And so when I realized that, I said, okay, let me start looking at research in computer science as a career. I will answer your what was the second question? I'm sorry, Gautam.
Well, what advice would you give to a young student whether they should do research or not? How do they think about this problem?
Yes, so I think what's important to do research is two things. One is you have to enjoy the subject that you do, and the second is you need to have not just the talent for it, but also you need to be able to deal with continuous setbacks, and then also the ability to see beyond those setbacks and be in the in it for the long run. So if you have that in you, plus you enjoy the subject, then I think it's a great thing to be in. So that's my second one. The answer to your second question. The third one is about what was the third question?
Industry lab. So you're in an industry lab.
Yes.
So
Right.
had a great so what did you think?
Yeah. So when I was graduating with my PhD, I was trying to decide between industry labs, academia, just joining startups. There were a bunch of choices, right? And the reason I chose an industry lab was because for me, it gave a good mix of real world problems and um, and also the ability to do long term research. So that combination really worked for me, and that's why I chose the industry lab. Yeah, but it's a personal decision.
Thanks. I hope your confusion with all the three questions doesn't. Others might have memorized them by now. So let me go to Supratik. So why did you get into research? And what do you advise your students today, whether they should do research or not? How do they introspect? And lastly, something about doing research at a large top institution like IIT.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on this discussion. And yeah, so I mean, what brought me to research? I guess it's not one event or one fine day I realized that research is my calling. It was more a sequence of things. So during my undergraduate, I had the sort of benefit of some of my teachers uh, telling me about some of the exciting stuff they were doing for their research, although that was not part of the curriculum. During my master's and PhD days at Stanford, I mean, that was just an amazing experience. I heard so many speakers, Jeff included, uh, faculty members, students, PhD students, postdocs. And that's when I sort of tried to, get this feeling that, okay, maybe there is a kind of satisfaction in solving these new kind of problems, persevering with these things. Of course, little did I know that there are lots of setbacks that also, come along with that. It's not just a rosy picture. But I sort of started talking to people, and that's when I decided, okay, I think this is probably my calling. Now, as far as your second question about what advice would I give to students, I mean, fortunately, I interact with a lot of bright students at IIT Bombay. Uh, Interestingly, not surprisingly, not all of them are interested in research. I mean, they're very bright, they have exceptional capabilities, but they don't want to work on things where there are significant uncertainties, blue sky problems, that kind of stuff. So, to add to what Ranjita has said, I would say that, of course, you must love the subject, but you must also have this, it should give you a kick that once you end up achieving even a small result, it may not be a very big result, that you sort of feel satisfied about it. And of course, the ability to deal with, I mean, the path of research is full of highs and lows, and I think the highs compensate, at least for me, a lot of the lows. So uh, it so one should have that uh, mindset to sort of go through this path of highs and lows, because the highs are really moments to cherish, moments that uh, are very, very satisfying. And about your third question, why academia and why not industry? So actually, I did work in an industrial lab for a year before I decided to move to the academia. I think both of them have their attractions, immense opportunities. Uh, so the reason I particularly moved to academia is because I also cared about teaching. I mean, I like teaching, and I want to interact with a lot of students, bright young students. Uh, these days, of course, these opportunities are also available in the industry. I know TCS Research, Microsoft Research provide lots of opportunities for students to go and do long-term internships there. It was not so during our time. So my reason for joining academia was that I wanted to do research, and at the same time, I wanted to interact with a lot of very bright young minds, and that's why I finally am in academia.
Thanks, Supratik. I'll turn to Swaran Lata now. Little as we get to go down the panel, we'll have to probably reach far back into our memories. How we started research, how you started research, Swaran Lata, why, and and if you were to advise a young person today how do they decide whether research is for them or not? And lastly, you had a long career in government and your passion for Indian language computing. And what was it like doing research in the government lab? Did you ever think of going to academia or otherwise?
First, thanks for getting me on the panel. I was a bright student when I was doing my BTech, and I was a gold medalist. So my professors expected me to join research. But at that point of time, I was very crazy about appearing for the Indian engineering services. So that's how I landed in the government sector. And I worked in the industry because we were having the passion of getting the indigenous industry on ground. So I proactively promoted the electronics industry in the India. That's right, from 1982 onwards for about a decade. And because of my academic interest, I went back and joined MTech, took study leave. So I did MTech from IT Delhi. So after that, I got an opportunity to be associated with the language technology initiatives of the Government of India. And I set up number of national projects in the areas of machine translation, optical character recognition, and speech recognition and the text to speech synthesis in Indian languages. We were looking at supporting all the 22 constitutionally recognized languages, connecting it with the technology so that the every citizen can get connected to the digital landscape. So it is at that point of time that I got a very thriving research ecosystem around me, and I was virtually a part of those national projects. And parallelly, I worked on standards so that we can bring the technology to the market. So that's how I got attracted to the research. And my personal journey in research started in the year 2012 at the age of 53. So I registered for PhD, and Punjabi is my native language, so I wanted to contribute to this language. So I did prosodic analysis of Punjabi language for building the speech systems. So right when I retired, so I secured my PhD degree as well. So my
Good.
passion for the language technology pushed me into the research, and I have been since then a researcher is always a researcher. So I will encourage the students to sort of work in the AI research, because the AI research has progressed so much now that we are trying to apply the AI techniques to every domain, be it the language domain, the speech domain, and especially the government initiatives like Digital India. We need to apply the language and speech technologies to get every citizen connected to the government initiatives. There have been a lot of successful examples of putting public digital infrastructure in government, like Aadhaar and UPI. So similar way, we can look at many of these, public sector initiatives and the government initiatives to connect with the citizen. So AI is a very large area. The only advice which I will give is that generally in research, we are very poor in lab to land because we are doing research on a small amount of data. So once we are doing research, we should pick up a domain and also tie up with the users and startups so that we can build meaningful solutions. So research and innovation should move together. Not only research we should do, we should innovate its applications as well. So I really advocate the young scientists, the young students attending the seminar to come forward and join the research in this area and do work in the speech and language technologies to make a social difference in the society. I hope I have answered all the questions.
Thank you, Swaran. I've done uh, a great job. Uh, Now we'll turn to Jeff, and I'm sure we'll go even further back in time with Jeff. So, Jeff, somehow I can't see you, but I guess it'll come on. So, Jeff, reach deep back into your memory and look, and when you were just getting into computer science or whatever it was then, computing in its infancy, perhaps, and how you decided to take up research as a career, and what would you advise young people today on how to make that decision? And I'll ask the third question later. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Gautam, for inviting me to this session. Um, yeah, first of all, let's. The world was very, very different. Just to put things in perspective, I graduated from high school in 1959. Uh, in those days, it was very rare for someone to even have a college degree. I had done fairly well in high school, wasn't at the top of my class exactly, but uh, my parents encouraged me to go to college, and I did. I was able to get a scholarship at Columbia Engineering School. Um, I had always sort of thought of myself as sort of a mathematician, but uh, you know, it was engineering was undoubtedly a good choice. Turned out, I think, to sort of resonate with me a little bit. How did I get into research? When I graduated, I sort of I was still fairly young. I really didn't feel like going to work, as most of my the fellow graduates did. Um, and so I discovered that I could actually get a fellow government fellowship uh, to continue studying, and that was all I. That was the whole thing. I didn't say, "Yeah, I've got to go into research." I got to say, I've got to avoid actually getting a job, and so I studied I got into a PhD program at, at Princeton. Um, it was electrical engineering. I had really no idea what I was going to. It was sort of quite by accident. I checked a box uh, for which program I wanted to be in, and I said, digital system sounds interesting. So there was, as I think Gautam mentioned, there was no computer science at the time. So I was studying. Actually, John Hopcroft had joined the faculty, and I worked with him a bit. Um, Ed McCluskey was the sort of the big digital systems guy at that time. Uh, but uh, again, when they told me that in order to get my PhD degree, I had to actually do something original, I sort of couldn't believe, that you could actually do such a thing. Turned out I was helped. I had a fellow by the name of Bob Chen, who was a researcher at IBM. I had actually taken his class when I was at Columbia, and so he took me on for the summer, got me started on a thesis in coding theory, and it turned out, it was not great. Frankly, my thesis was nothing to be proud of, but but I was able to do a little bit of it, and uh, I when I graduated, it didn't take that long, by the way. Those days, the 3 years was plenty to get a PhD. Now it's more like 5 or 6. Uh, and I uh, it, at McCluskey had some good contacts at Bell Labs. And Bell Labs, by the way, at the time was um, the best place to do research. I still didn't quite know what research was all about, but Ed got me a job at Bell Labs, and I joined Doug McElroy's department, which sort of became the Unix group a few years later. Uh, but basically, they just told me, okay, um, the U.S. government required that AT&T, the telephone company, put 1% of its revenues into research, and so they just basically hired people and let them do anything they wanted. And I um, so I worked. Actually, John Hopcroft was on leave at Bell Labs at the time, and then Alejo came and joined, and we talked about um, uh, compiling, mostly parsing algorithms, and we just sort of did what we wanted, and pretty soon it just sort of by luck, perhaps I became able. I discovered I was able to sort of do this stuff, to do stuff that was new and publishable. I know this isn't really helping much because the world is very different today. But I would say this: the issue is getting the training that comes with a PhD. And again, it's what the training you get now is very much better and more extensive than what we got back then. It's good to get a PhD to learn the frontiers of your subject, whether you go into research or, as many people do, decide to go more into development or leadership in the software field in one way or another. I think that's fine. I think to me the important thing, and what I told my students when I had them, is just get your PhD, go through it, learn all you can, and then go out and do something useful.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to ask you one more question in a slightly different way than I asked the others. You must have, we know you've come across many well-known students in your teaching career, and you've worked with them closely, and some of them have gone on to do great research. Some of them have gone on to found great companies and perhaps dropped out of the research. Can you tell us some stories about what advice they sought from you, and what you gave such students, and what you would give such a student today, perhaps?
Okay, well, it's again. I had one student. I think I'm not going to mention names, but they were like maybe 6 months away from a PhD. They had they had done some very interesting work, and I they had the opportunity to join a company, a startup that become a founder of a company, and they asked me what to do, and my answer was, look, if the company is successful and you don't join it, you're going to kick yourself for the rest of your life. Okay, if you join it and it fails, you're going to lose 2 years of your life, and then you'll come back and you'll pick up the pieces. And the interesting thing was, I was apparently the only one who told them that. And fortunately, they took my advice. Company turned out to be extremely successful. And then actually, after their lockup period was over, the company got bought out, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but you typically have to spend a couple of years at the company that buys your company. That's usually part of the deal. After that was over, they were rich, and they just said, "Okay, coming back." Did his PhD, and by the way, has not exactly done research, but has inspired a number of startup companies, and I think helped them in various ways, not by publishing research papers, but by helping them in a number of very, very important ways. So that's another route that you can take with a doctorate.
So that's great, Jeff. I'm not sure you answered the second question enough for the youngsters on the call. So I'll just ask it once more. If a youngster you would advise them to ask themselves one or two questions to decide whether research is a great career for them, what would those be?
Again, I wouldn't ask them. Again, to me, the issue is get yourself as much education as you possibly can manage. And that means, of course, you have to, sort of be willing to put in the study. You have to be able to afford it one way or another to spend many years in school, and then see what you want to do. It's very common for people to do research for a while, and go off and I don't know, start a company, join a company, do just do mainstream, software production for a while, maybe go back to research again, as for example the fellow that I just talked about regarding the start. So I don't think the question of should I go into research is as important as how much education can I possibly manage to get. That's
Great,
my
excellent,
opinion.
excellent perspective, a novel perspective, certainly for me.
Novel, yes. Novel, okay.
Yeah, certainly that's perhaps. But if looking back at all the panelists' answers, it seems to be a common that everyone pretty much drifted into research, and actually that I can say it's true of myself as well. But let me now turn to Ranjita once more. And Ranjita, let's get into some sort of scientific details. What has excited you over the years? Has it been one major big problem, or have you moved from problem to problem? And how can you describe that journey? And how do you decide what to work on?
Yeah, so this is a difficult one for me because what excites me is not really the problem definition. It is the means which excites me. So I like applying data driven techniques to systems problems right from day one, actually, or applying theoretical learnings to systems problems. So it was a little difficult for me, really, because the best way to, or at least the well-established way of doing research is you figure out this problem, the meaty problem, which really sounds exciting, and solve it whichever way you want, right? But here I was where I liked the means, and I had to figure out what is the problem I need to work on so that I could use these means. So it's a little backwards for me, but unfortunately fortunately, that's the way I am. So what happened serendipitously about, I would say, maybe 8 years ago or about a decade ago was that we started moving from, software model where you bought, an operating system for your desktop on a CD to these cloud services. And once you had cloud services, you had huge amounts of data about these cloud services. And suddenly there's all this data that I can apply statistics to, machine learning to, various kinds of optimizations to make our systems better. So suddenly things clicked there, right? Because I had this problem space now where you wanted to make cloud services better, and then you had all this data to do that with. And it just worked well for me. So that's my journey, really.
Did you get me, Ranjita?
Yeah, yes. Could you hear me?
Yeah. So what happens when on the occasions where it doesn't go so well, and sometimes you hit bottlenecks? Or
That's true. So that happened to me a lot, right? Because there were these kind of problems that I enjoyed, and sometimes I hit bottlenecks because I needed data to solve my problems, and very often the data wasn't available or it was too dirty. So I had a whole bunch of papers rejected because they said you want to apply these data-driven techniques, but you're using artificial data So reject, right? And then when I went to the product groups within Microsoft to say, look, I have this cool data driven technique to do this, and they'd say, where? But then, we don't have the data. There are all sorts of privacy issues to collect all this data. We just can't do that. So I had paper rejections on one hand, I had the product groups not taking my solutions on the other. So it was difficult, right? But for whatever reason, I just stuck on, partly because I enjoyed it. And there were times when I really considered quitting this whole research career, quite seriously, saying this is not going anywhere. But then, this happened 10 years ago, and that stopped me from quitting. So it's a lot of serendipity, but it's also a lot of just being there. When I look back, I'm glad I just persevered and I stuck to what I enjoyed doing. Yeah.
Pratik, let me turn to you and tell us something about what has excited you over the years, and in terms of research, and that too, from you must have guided a number of students, and how do you basically come up with problems for them to work on, and how does that process work?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So, something that I always wanted to sort of see if theory and practice can be bridged. I mean, in theory, we often have results, and then in practice, they don't really. I mean, I guess the best example for this is in linear programming, interior points algorithm is polynomial time. Simplex is not, but yet, almost every linear program solver out there uses simplex and it works better. Of course, now we have slightly better understanding of why that happens. But this quest to bridge theory with practice, that when something works well in theory, can we turn it into practice? And if something is working well in practice, can we provide a good theoretical understanding of it? So this has kind of been the underlying theme for what I've worked on for the last 2 decades. Uh, so when and this is sometimes it can get very frustrating, because I mean, even today I know that there are so many things that work well in practice for which I'm unable to uh, present a good theory for it. And but the quest continues, so we keep trying. We try to understand more about the problem, try to see what more insights we can get theoretically. As far as my students are concerned, yes, as I said, I have interacted with quite a few very bright students. So I have sort of, keeping this theme in mind, that, can we bridge theory and practice wherever possible? So some of them have chosen to just focus completely on the theoretical side, and I've said, okay, I mean, that's fine. Let's start off with this problem, let's get deeper into it. If it's ending up, explaining something that works well in practice, that's okay, as long as we have some better theoretical insights. Some of them have gone and just done very good systems development work. But typically, in all of those, I have insisted that we should have some understanding of the theoretical thing. So this is, I guess, an underlying theme. And I work in the area of formal methods, where we are trying to reason about the correctness, trying to give some kinds of formal guarantees about system. So this kind of fits nicely over there, that we want to talk about formal guarantees, proofs of certain things that work. But these things that we are reasoning about are things out there in real life. These are not conjured up in one's office.
And what about failures? I mean, what
Oh,
happens when
Stanford.
something doesn't work? How do you get your students motivated beyond that?
Yeah, this has happened to me so many times. you know,
Uh, Something happened. I think, Supratik, are you there? We might need some technical help. Hello. Okay. Priyanka, should I move on to some, or is there going to be a fix? Okay, I will now. In the interest of time, let's wait till the technical team gets its Supratik back. But I'll move on to Swaran Lata. And as you mentioned, you had sort of wandered into the language technology initiative in the government. So tell us something about how that effort uh, worked in your opinion. uh, could we have done better, and have enough of an impact from your perspective, and what all remains to be done?
I think the effort in terms of the research was very fruitful, but the direct translational efforts didn't take place because research, is a slow process in the academia, and industry goes forward at a fast rate. So right now, I would say that we need to work on the translational models which can get us fast to the market. But there's a lot of spin-off. All the researchers who worked in our projects have helped support industry in this area and have helped in the translational activities of the companies, the industry, rather than the direct government initiative. So I hope that in the future, that's why I flagged this point, that while we are doing research in the academia, we need to take users on board and also the startups on board so that the time to market can be reduced. I have a very good experience while I was doing my personal research. Once I recorded a data for studying the intrasyllabic stress, because Punjabi is tonal language, so it has few characters which are tonal. It has laryngeal tonal characteristics also. So while I was doing my study, I recorded a data, and for 6 months I analyzed this data, but I couldn't get to any results. So this I am flagging to the students because you asked this question to the other panelist. So after 6 months I was nowhere. So then I sort of applied my mind, and I got back to some other experts who, linguists who understood the Punjabi language very well. So I was advised to record a particular kind of data. And then after 6 months, after analyzing that data, I published a paper which is very well received. And I gave a formula for calculating the intrasyllabic stress. And that can help in building prosody in the Punjabi speech systems. So I will say that the students who are carrying out research, the research not only gives us the you know that you've got a PhD. It gives us a personality where you start applying your mind thoroughly, which Dr. Ullman also mentioned, that you should get maximum education. The maximum education inculcates a lot of good habits in you for being thorough with what you're doing and applying yourself fully to the problem. So, if you are doing research, you are likely to face failures, but those failures should not impact you. You can pick the thread again and solve the problem and get guidance from the mentors around you and your guide to solve the problem. So, I think it's the attitude which matters rather than the problem which you face. So, I encourage all the students sitting here to go for research, not necessarily at a stage where you are looking for a job opportunity, or you can do it later also in life, but one must experience research at some point of time. That's what I feel.
Thanks. I think it's a the way you might put it is that you're making your mind a better place to be in by being by spending some time in research. So Pratik, are you back? Any chance you're back? Okay, great. So
Yeah,
we lost a while. So just tell us some vignette about how you help your students deal with the failure.
yeah. So they were saying that this is part and parcel of the journey. And to be honest, I think some students uh, of course, what I tell them is that I try to keep them motivated, try to tell that the work that they do is good, or maybe there is constructive feedback to be taken from every rejection. But I think it also depends a lot on the student's individual, each student takes it differently, and so there are students who had who have gone a few years into research and then they decided a calling, and the failures were too much for them. Some of them uh, took it very very negatively in the initial years, but I guess as they see more and more peers around them, as they see their own professors, as they see stalwarts in the area also talking about uh, fields. So I guess, am I audible still, Gautam?
It breaks a bit, but yeah, if you come closer, it might help. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Uh, yeah, so I was saying is that uh, keeping students motivated by telling them that, you know, rejection is a story, and as long as they will eventually get accepted. But this goes well with some students. Fortunately, most of the students I have interacted with, but for some of them, it didn't go well in the sense that they decided that this was too much for them, and they okay, I mean, there are other things to do. And I said that's perfectly fine. It's not that everybody. I mean, you give it a shot, you give it your shot, and then. Uh, if that's something that gives you a kick, if that's something that really makes you happy, we go with it, and we are all there to support, sort of, be with you in the journey. But if somebody has made up their mind after giving it a fair shot that it's not their calling, that's perfectly fine.
Thanks, Supratik. Now I'll turn to Jeff. Jeff, I'm going to ask you a slightly difficult question, perhaps, but you know, I've known you for many years now, probably more than a decade now, and uh, you're known in some sort of, if there was one stamp to put, compilers database is really, I mean, that's what you got the Turing Award for and stuff like that. But having known you for a decade, I mean, there's almost no field of computer science where you don't pretty much know what's the state of the art, or at least can point to a gut feeling. So, how have you sort of chosen problems over the years? Is there one common thread which has driven you, or have you moved from area to area, driven by students, or how has the research journey been for you?
Uh, yeah, well, that's a good question. I would say this: uh, the best way to pick a good research topic is to find out what people need and and attack that. So, for example, when I went to Bell Labs, um, it was remember compiling. The first compilers were built around 1960, so this was maybe 10 years. Um, uh, less than 10 years later, writing a compiler was a big deal, and in those days that's what people needed, right? That was the thing that was enabling people to create software, and at a much more rapid rate than when you had to write in assembly code, say. uh, and yet compilers, they were hard to write, and we were, you know, uh, it was a huge effort to write a compiler in those days, and now, well, uh, so there was a sense that the theory could help, could help make the process faster, and uh, uh, ironically, I would say, because we were ultimately, it was Don Knuth, Bob Floyd, and the one who turned parsing from a multi-year project to a couple of hours work, uh, uh, people sort of had the sense that theory was going to solve everything, and it unfortunately doesn't. This was sort of um, uh, an anomalous case, but it was very clear that working on how you make compilers run faster and make it easier to write compilers was something that everybody needed. So once you focus on that, there were lots of things that Al Aho and I could do, and we worked not only in parsing, but we looked at translation. Well, code optimization was another big issue um, where the theory and invention of algorithms turned out to be a rather useful uh, endeavor. But the answer is always look for what it is people need, and go after that. Uh, I haven't always followed, frankly. Sometimes you just go and do something because it's fun, uh, but that is certainly the best way to have an impact is to find out what people need and attack that. Or even probably the best thing you can do is to figure out that what people need but don't realize they need.
Fantastic.
That they won't.
So yeah, you mentioned theory and how theory could miraculously solve real problems and actually in ways which people didn't imagine. So people, young students perhaps wonder whether they should look at theory, what kind of theory, what kind of applications could come from that theory. There are many people who are just attracted to theory just because of the elegance of it, because of the fun part. The industry side sees, well, it's just theory today. Maybe there are people like Supratik who try to explain things theoretically which actually work. But then there are other sides of in industry which say, look, like deep learning just works and only small number of people just care about the theory. So when you talk up to a student who is interested in theory, what kind of theory should they actually think about? And I remember you giving me some examples of theory which is really nice but actually has huge practical examples. You mentioned one, but
Yeah,
I'm sure there are many others.
yeah. Again, I tried to. What I tried to say was parsing was a deceptively simple example where the theory really knocked the problem on its just knocked the problem flat, and it it's rare that theory by itself is is going to solve your problem. Uh, Look, I still like sort of playing around abstractly with things, and there have been many successes. Oh, uh, model checking, for example, very deep theory that is beginning to have a lot of impact. Interestingly, I learned in compiling as well as many other fields. Um, uh, you know, every once in a while, someone comes up with some really interesting algorithm. Even today, there are some very interesting and surprising algorithms that are developed. There are also a lot of people who spend a lot of time um, knocking it down from n log n log n to just n log n or something, um, and the time constant makes it infeasible to actually implement the algorithm. Uh, so uh, you can. Um, Well, I don't know. When you're doing a thesis, again, part of what you're doing is is learning to do something original, and often it doesn't matter as much as whether it's something useful and original or just original, as long as it's hard. But as your career progresses, most people, I think, do and should do. Again, think more about um, uh, what do people need, and often these days, some fairly deep mathematics is necessary to deliver what people need. We talk about there is a lot of very interesting and deep mathematics and statistics that go into machine learning today. So um, there are certainly opportunities to do theory. Uh, uh,
Great.
but well, yeah, enough said.
And
Okay.
sorry, did I interrupt you?
No,
Okay.
no,
All right.
you
So I think
rescued me.
sorry.
Right.
Okay. So I think it's we have 25 minutes. I could go on and talk about various things and ask everybody about a whole bunch of technical topics that I'm sure everybody's interested in hearing your opinions on, everyone. But I'll turn our attention to the audience now and take whatever questions they have. And if they don't have, then I can come back and ask some tricky questions myself. But let's get some questions from the audience, Priyanka.
And some of you have chanced into research, and most of you had a specific interest in research. But one thing that I learned today is it's important to have fun and do what you like. With that, I think we have a few questions from our friends in the media. uh, and I think the first question, pardon me, I'm looking down at my computer to see those questions. But there's a question from Shivani Shinde from Business Standard. And her question is, one of the real challenges to attract students to research is remuneration, especially with peers moving to better paid jobs. This is one of the challenges in India because if you compare this to foreign universities, there is a huge gap. How do you then attract talent? I think Gautam and Dr. Swaran, Lata, or Supratik, one of you can answer this question.
I think I'll pass this question to Supratik because I'm sure this is a problem faced by the IITs every year when they look for faculty. So and still they get great faculties. How do they do it?
Yeah. So I think this is actually a very, a question that we bat, every recruiting cycle. Just earlier today, I was on the committee. We were looking at candidates. So, I don't know if I have the best answer to this question. The point is that remuneration is one part of the satisfaction, and indeed there are, great research organizations. Two of them already represented on this research of my research, where one gets to do absolutely cutting edge research, and also you get good remuneration. But I think that remuneration is just one part of that. And so for a lot of people who really are working on what they're working, uh, the fun of doing it, of course it has to be, the remuneration has to be something that you don't start worrying about basic things in life, because then it'll get difficult. But I think these days, you know, academia and industry are both kind of coming up to a point where India that there are enough attractions which go beyond remuneration. I mean, in the academia, for example, we get to interact with some of the best and brightest minds in the country, and it's just an amazing experience. I have personally learned so much from 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds who just bring in fresh perspective, something that I have not thought about for years. And that's something which I get cannot be compensated by remuneration. Even if you give me a large amount of money, why would I come? Right? So the question is a very valid question, and anybody who's trying to get into a career in research, of course, has to consider about remuneration. But I are these channels, and I would say even in the government research labs these days, I think the remuneration is quite decent. It wasn't like that long back when I was doing my studies, but these days things are much better. And then, of course, one has their personal preferences. Like Ranjita said, that she wanted to be in the industry because she can deal with real life problems. Uh, get the insider story industry. I mean, I like interacting a lot with students. I like teaching as well. So the answer to your question is that it's a very, very personal choice. It's not the remuneration that matters always. And I think these days there are opportunities coming from both industry, academia, and government. They are often incomparable opportunities, but each of them, provides its own benefits, and it's very person specific. So to answer Gautam, yes, we do have problems recruiting faculty. In fact, we have also lost a few faculty, but I don't think it was because of remuneration. Being part of an academic institution sometimes also brings its own benefit.
I hope that answers the question. Does anyone else want to chime in to answer that question? Yes, Jeff.
Okay. Uh, yeah, let me talk a little bit about what goes on in the United States. Uh, Look, and first of all, I understand that it can be very difficult for a bright student to manage to get the education that they can absorb. I remember at Stanford talking to one Indian undergraduate who was at Stanford, and I was trying to encourage them to go and go for the PhD. As I said, that should be the thing that a bright student does. And they basically said, look, my parents have sacrificed to get me this far, and I need to support them now. I need to get a job. Okay. This, in my mind, is a tragedy. But on the other hand, I don't quite know what to do with it. I would say this: if you can, in the United States, the major schools will support PhD candidates. Um, you don't live in the lap of luxury, frankly, but you can get enough to live on. You would not, let's say, need to be dependent on your parents' resources if you can get into a PhD program at a good school. If you go for a master's program, now this is true at Stanford. I think it's true at comparable schools as well. We don't guarantee you support, but if you can speak English well and are willing to take a teaching assistantship, your chances are pretty high of being able to get to get support, and for which you help out with teaching a course. So I think financing an education is it's it, it it can be tough. Again, there are ways in the United States, and I assume uh, in many other places as well. I assume, for example, the IIT graduate programs will fund people to keep them alive anyway, right? Um, uh, it, you know, but I wish that um, governments, let's say, recognized the importance of educating the students who can do the research, who can do the advanced development, can just push technology forward, uh, and made it a little bit easier for them to get the education that they need.
Let me just add to that
Thank
for Shivani. Uh, you know, the research labs in India, TCS included, and many of the other industry labs have uh, opportunities for pre-doctoral programs for somebody who would think about perhaps doing a normal industry job, but has in the back of their mind, do I want to do research? And if there are good students like that, there are positions for pre-doctoral, which we are at highly competitive industry scales, where for a couple of years they can actually explore research, and if they do really well, they might actually get into Stanford, and then they go off and do their PhD. Or if they decide that no, maybe I'm not cut out for the top school and I don't want to do research if I'm not that good, then they haven't lost the 2 years of earning capability, and they can go off and do a normal industry job. So we have those options now, which we didn't have till a few years ago. I think we can move
Sure.
on, right?
Yeah. So the next question is from Pragati Oberoi from Times Now. I think the first question, Gautam, maybe you can answer. What is the future of computing research in India?
Future of computing research in India is very bright. That's one thing I can say, and with great confidence, that every day I see more and more bright students doing great things, and I'm absolutely sure that if I was a young student today, I would be pretty much at the bottom of the heap. I'm seeing so many great students here today. So I think it's a very bright future. At the same time, we are not leaders. So we have to recognize that we as a country have a long way to go. Given our size and given our position in the world, we should be much better at research. That's my personal opinion. Anybody else have opinion on that? Supratik or Swaran, Lata or Ranjita, because it's an India question.
I have a follow-up, so not me. So Pragati has a follow-up question for Ranjita. Maybe Ranjita, you can take it up. In terms of job opportunity. Oh, Supratik, you're trying to say something.
You want to add on that one?
Yeah. So actually, to add to what Jeff said, I think it's very important. So I was talking more about what you do after a PhD, whether you join the industry or academia. But supporting, master's, PhD students so that they can go through that journey. So yes, institutions like IITs do have scholarships, research assistantships and all of that. But it's been very difficult from my own personal experience to get to postdoctoral candidate because it sets rules, which I'm sure there are good reasons for those rules, and that salary structure where it's a no-brainer whether one should, a real person should, me as a postdoc researchers, or should just go and join an industrial research lab, or maybe just apply for a faculty position at some other place. So I think this needs to be revised. I think this is where I think computing is kind of different from other sciences. So, for example, the postdoctoral structure, remuneration structure across all sciences, doing chemistry, physics, maths, biology, computer science, everything is the same. I'm sure those areas also need a lift, and I cannot represent those areas, but certainly computer science need better support for postdoc scientists to stay back for a few years in the academia. The kind of postdocs I have worked with while I was doing my graduate studies at Stanford, just amazing. And it's very difficult to get them here, and I think the remuneration does matter.
Sure, Supratik. So the second question that is for Ranjita is in terms of job opportunities, how much intake or growth are we seeing in the next couple of years?
So, I can answer that question from my perspective alone. I'm sure there are many more perspectives here. But as you know that over the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, there has been explosive growth in the use of technologies for different purposes, including this webinar. This might not have been possible 2 or 3 years ago. Given that, right, there is a huge amount of growth in terms of the computing needs, including personnel, um, to support these kind of technologies. And as a result, even in research, right, a lot of new problems are showing up, which need to be solved, given all these distance kind of technologies. So I'd say it's a huge time for growth right now, given how the pandemic has shaped uh, the way we work and the way we interact.
Right. Dr. Swarnlata, I want to come to you with the third question that Pragati has sent us. I ask you simply because you've worked with the government and you might have an opinion on that. How can India's education system be changed to suit someone who wishes to pursue a career in research?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So her question is, how can India's education system be changed or modified to, make sure to suit students to pursue a career in research?
I think the importance of research and the methodologies to carry out research. There could be a subject at the graduation level which can orient students to understand whether they would be interested in it or not. And another thing is that we are also looking at the speech to speech translational activities, by way of which many students who are today deprived of the opportunities for higher education, through the Department of Education, NPTEL and SWAYAM initiatives, they are getting opportunity to access to the educational materials which are much more available through the use of technology. So maybe those will also help promoting research in future.
That's very well put. We have a question from Sheenu Pradhan. She's from
Ranjita
Sites in
had a
Plus.
point.
Sure,
Ranjita had
please go
something
ahead.
to add. Yeah.
Yes, Ranjita, please.
Yeah, if you don't mind. I feel that, something like probability, basic probability theory needs to be taught in high schools really early on. Because, data science is everywhere now. What we call data science now, which was called statistics a few years ago, is everywhere. And so, I, things like clinical trials,
Yeah,
doctors, right? A lot of medicine is driven by clinical trials and data science. That I'm just saying that's an example. So I feel like all this probability theory, at least basic ideas, need to be taught in high school more than it is right now.
understood. So we have a question from Sheenu Pradhan. She's from Sites in Plus. Her question is, how can the students build their careers in research in the private sector and how soon can they grow? I think again Gautam and Ranjita can take this up because you're working in the private sector, so to say.
So, firstly, let me just go back to the previous question quickly. I have college going kids, and let me tell you, all their professors talk to them about research. So, it's not that they don't know what is research, they have not experienced it, but they are hearing glowing testimony about research from their professors. But they are not hearing enough testimony about other fields. So I think students have to actually be exposed to all kinds of possible experiences. They do it through internships, they do it from their professors, and then take a good hard look at what they actually want to pursue. Because while the future is bright and there are a lot of bright students, we certainly want the best going into research and we have to encourage that. We don't want people who can't get a job going into research.
Right.
And really, we need to focus on the best and encourage the best, remunerate them well. And so now the question about industry. I think the large industries, certainly in computing, whether it's TCS, Microsoft, Google, IBM, they certainly have research labs in the country, and there are ample opportunities for top students in those labs. Uh, and as far as the computing research in industry goes, it's really grown over the past 5 years. Ranjita, you want to take that question from your side as well?
Oh, no, I think you answered it very well, Gautam. And I just like to add the point you made for an earlier question, which was this pre-doc program or the research fellow program, which allows people to join, say, Microsoft Research or TCS Research or the other research labs for 1 or 2 years just to try out research. And I think that's a great way to experience research as well.
Sure. Thank you. We have a set of questions that Nafisa Khatun from TOI has shared with us. I think the first question I would ask Jeff to answer. Which are the sectors that, where we are seeing most number of hiring for computing research scholars? So, apart from technology, which are the sectors that are hiring the most number of computing research scholars?
Okay. Well, the top three I would say are machine learning, and machine learning. That is, if
Sure.
if you know machine learning, you can get a job anywhere. If you don't, you probably can't. Well, you probably can somewhere, but there's no question that this is uh, by far the most exciting field. Uh, and I've spent most of my life criticizing the AI community for basically peddling snake oil, and they were, but it's changed, and um, the machine learning, the algorithms that come out of machine learning, this technology is real. It does mean really so much. It solves so many interesting problems in interesting ways. Um, Obviously, cryptography and well, computer security more generally uh, is another key area where we don't have enough people. Again, but by the way, both of these are very mathematical fields. But both machine learning and computer security uh, require a lot of mathematics. They're very hard to learn, and therefore it's no surprise that we're not, that the demand is there.
Can I just chip in a bit? I know you said machine learning, machine learning, machine learning, but certainly in the press here, we hear a lot about quantum computing. So, what's your
Yes.
view? Is that another upcoming field, Jeff?
No,
Simple
That's
answer.
interesting.
uh,
Yeah,
I
thanks as well.
I yeah, no, I have my doubts about quantum computing. I mean, um, it's a form of analog computing that may have some applications. Um, I'm very dubious that it's going to meet its promise. I mean, I understand that people are building machines with larger and larger numbers of qubits, but we're still way below what you need to have an impact uh, on real problems, especially cracking codes, which is sort of the original motivation. Um, by the way, I should, as in all fairness, co- quantum communication may turn out to be more interesting. Okay, ability to actually build a provably secure channel. Uh, that the technology there does seem to have some have a lot more promise.
Great.
I think the well, let it
And go ahead,
let
Jeff.
it sit. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Uh,
Complete.
the interesting thing, you see, Shor's algorithm sort of set the stage for the idea that quantum computing really has impact. But if you look at the history, that's kind of the only problem, right? Is uh, essentially factoring integers, uh, where even theoretically you get a lot of impact. I mean, there are a few other, I know that people are doing the research. There are a few other problems, specialized cases of matrix multiplication and so on. But it uh, the underlying algorithms aren't even there, except for this one problem of can I crack RSA codes?
Well, we got some
And
nice quotes from there. And uh, Priyanka, we have a
Yeah,
minute left. Do you have any questions?
we have a few. I think we can go over a little bit over 8:30 if that's okay, because we have a lot of questions coming in. The first question, I think,
I'm okay to go over a bit if everybody else is, but let's get everybody's consent. Maybe maximum 10 minutes, let's say. How much?
sure. Let's take
Is
a
that
couple
okay,
of
Jen?
questions.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a question on academic research versus industry research. Are those boundaries blurring? Supratik, I want you and Ranjita to answer these questions because one is from industry and the other is from academia. So are the lines blurring there?
Ranjita, you want to first? I guess, or
Sure,
whatever.
absolutely not. On, I would say that the lines are unfortunately more well defined today than they were a few years ago. Um, if you consider machine learning, for instance, right? Machine learning, what you need to innovate with machine learning is data. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us, the most of the data is with industry these days, and it's been a little difficult to make all of this data available openly. While there are, of course, a lot of channels to release such data, it is still very difficult to make it completely open to anyone around the world. So, from that perspective, I think the lines have actually become darker rather than blurred. But that said, right, there are many other areas where similar kind of work is being done in academia and industry, and there are very healthy collaborations between industry research labs or even companies and academia. So, for instance, IIT Bombay, Microsoft Research, we have multiple things that we work on together, right? But it's just to make sure, but the problem is the data issue, right? That is really owned by industry these days. But at the same time, we get great students from academia to work with us as interns, and that helps to blur these dark lines. Yeah, go on, Supratik. Do you want to add?
Yeah, so I think the interactions that we've been having with the industry has only strengthened over the years. I mean, these days, a lot of us. I mean, unless somebody is very, very dogmatic that they don't want to look at industrial applications, I think almost all of my colleagues I know of are they collaborate with the industry, so they look at problems from the industry. So in that sense, perhaps there is coming together for a common cause that, as Jeff said, we look at problems that really matter, and the industry is a great place to provide the problems. In fact, the government is also provide such problems. It's not just problems coming from customers or clients of the industry. It's also problems coming from governance issues, problems that the government faces trying to address various kinds of issues around the country. Academics, we collaborate closely with industry, both industrial development and industrial research, and also with the government organizations. So that way there is, I mean, I see these collaborations increasing over the years. I mean, 20 years back, lesser collaboration, today there are. So that way there is coming together of the causes for which we are working. But I agree with Ranjita that there are some hurdles that are difficult to cross. Yet I mean, hopefully we'll be able
We
to.
march onward. Yeah.
Let me add
Uh,
let me add 2 points. One is the lines may be blurring in some respects and some not, but we don't want them to completely blur. There is a space for long-term deep research which can really only happen in academia with the freedom that there is, and the lack of short-term pressures of any kind to productization or elsewhere. And I think we need that long-term research, and we don't want every academic researcher to become an industry researcher. Certainly, we look forward to academia doing long-term research. And second thing is, from the research community pool internationally, I've certainly seen that what is industry research when it comes to a publication and what is research, there is a big blur. So I keep arguing while reviewing papers that, look, this is a industry track paper, don't ask the same questions that you would of a research track paper, and vice versa.
Great. There's a student question. I think it's for Jeff. How important or necessary is a PhD for having a long career in deep research?
Yeah. Okay. Another good question. I think it's pretty important. It's not absolutely important. Um, Ken Thompson, the inventor of Unix, had a master's degree. Bob Floyd, who was on the faculty at Stanford for many years, won the Turing Award, only had a bachelor's degree. Okay. But it's you do learn, so especially today, you do learn something getting a PhD. So you know, if you, it is certainly let's say by far the best path to getting into a real research career. It's not the only path. It will never be the only path. Um, uh, you know, but if it's what you want, I do strongly recommend that you find a way to get yourself a doctorate at a good school, learn from a good faculty to see them doing the frontier research and becoming part of that.
I think we can take one last question, and that is for Swaran Lata. What are the opportunities in India as India is on its way to become a digital nation? So, what are the upcoming opportunities for researchers in computing?
I would say that all these sectors of industry as well as government are pulling up their socks to apply AI in various problems. So machine learning, as already has been emphasized, is an area which can make a difference. So now people need to understand whether they would like to look at if they look at the social side of it, then they can look at the government and public sector side. And if they want to go to the industry, there are ample opportunities that every corporate sector is today applying AI for improving their processes, including the retail. Every sector has opportunity, so it is up to the students to leverage that.
Absolutely. It is up to the students to leverage that, all the opportunities that come your way. And the eminent panelists here today, I hope, have answered some of your questions. I think the bottom line here is from what we've heard so far is pursue what you want to pursue and what you like. And it is important to have fun at the same time. And it is also important to get a PhD. Uh, with that, I think we've come to the end of today's webinar. But before we leave, we will play out a very interesting video of some interns who worked with us at TCS RNI. See you on the other side. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
As an undergrad, my internship was very important to me. It was my first impression of the industry, surely a pivotal moment in my career.
My PhD work is on the mathematical modeling of a biological neuron. I knew I wanted to do internship along similar lines. So I wondered anyone here even working in this particular area.
For over 40 years, we at TCS Research have believed that people are the bedrock of all achievements. We have had student interns from across the globe. We have published papers with them, and we have always valued their participation in research and the flow of new ideas across a variety of areas.
I had completed 2 internships with TCS Research before joining as a full-time researcher. These internships really helped me to understand and gauge my aptitude for research. What impressed me about TCS Research was that it was working at the cutting edge of data science. Unlike any other open research problem, we were working towards an industrial problem.
We know internship, though short, is an important phase in a student's career. They have many questions and we try to take them seriously. We consider their background, their interests, their expectations, and give them the freedom to choose a problem, a real problem that can be solved in a short duration. We are, however, open to longer internships as well.
The interns get to do exactly what they want to do. Upfront, we ask them what is their expectation and try to see that we can match their expectation. During these internships, we impose rigor. This allows the interns to think out of the box and come up with ideas which they are aware of.
I remember I was the youngest in review meetings, still an undergrad. Yet my views on approaching any new concern would be taken seriously. That gave me confidence and the feeling that I could learn quickly to be at par and address any new problem spaces.
I worked on speaker diarization, picking up clues from non-speech events. Whenever I hit a dead end, my mentor would step in to discuss workarounds.
We understand that it takes the intern some time to come to terms with the differences between industrial and academic research. They are 2 very different worlds. But in the short time they spend at TCS Research, they get to learn the value of solving a real world problem. And that is an experience that will stay with them throughout their career.